Broadcasting out of Alliance Wrestling Studios, pontificating on pro wrestling, the innovator of Talk NWA, he is J. Cow.
How about that, huh? Your boy's got his own intro. What? That's crazy, right? Special thanks to my friend Josh Shibata. He is the voice. He is the voice of Future Stars of Wrestling. He's the voice of Ground Zero down in San Diego. Josh Shibata is a great dude and was so cool to do a promo, not a promo, but to do an announcement for us. This is the pre-party for the Alliance Guys podcast. Of course, this is a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. For weeks and weeks and weeks, we have been the lead-in to your favorite program, NWA POWERRR. Now, unfortunately, NWA Power is not airing right now. You know, the whole world is kind of put on pause because of COVID-19, and unfortunately, that's a bummer because it was, that's not what we were looking for. I don't know about you guys, but I was planning to be in Atlanta for the TV tapings for the pay-per-view, and none of that's happening. So here we sit, just waiting for the next thing to happen, the next news to come out. And I do apologize because I am trying to get the multi-stream going here, and I think we're about to get it here in just a second. Maybe not. I don't know. Looks like we're going. Nope, maybe not. Wasn't supposed to be that bad. Okay, there we go. All right, that'll work. So now we got the multi-stream going, guys. If you're following us on Twitch.tv at the TheAllianceBlog, we're streaming live. If you follow us on YouTube, we're there as well. And also, now we are on Instagram Live because we've got your bases covered. Anyways, guys, so this has been an interesting week. I know that the NWA is planning to air the much-beloved matchup of Jocephus challenging Tim Storm and that empty arena in the Impact Zone, I should point out. That empty arena match that kind of spaced out Tim Storm's opportunity to challenge for that NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Now, as some of you guys may or may not know, there was a point in time when the NWA, and I'm talking about Lightning One, Billy Corgan, Dave Lagana, and those fellas actually did have kind of a working relationship with Impact. And it was short-lived, and this had some of the repercussions. Some of this had the repercussions of the lawsuit that was filed against Dixie Carter, and at that point it was the TNA Entertainment Group that Billy had filed suit against. If you guys don't know, at one point Billy Corgan was the president of TNA Wrestling, and was actually bankrolling some of the operations for Impact Wrestling. Now, of course, a lot of this changed when Anthem came in and bought out TNA, put some money back in Dixie's pocket. But there was a lot of problems after that purchase that kind of fell flat on the face of Billy Corgan and Dave Lagana. Unfortunately, it kind of it screwed up any opportunity that the two companies had going forward, working together. Now, we can all talk about what happened, but all of us would just be guessing because none of us really actually know. I mean, what we do know is this, that Corgan had filed a restraining order against Dixie Carter, that Impact Wrestling was in financial trouble, they needed to sell the company. Everyone was kind of expecting Billy Corgan to buy it. He filed suit to kind of get control of TNA away from Dixie Carter. Of course, those proceedings got thrown out in the Tennessee legislature and Tennessee judiciary branch. So none of that happened. But what would have happened? That's what I want to talk about today. What would have happened if the National Wrestling Alliance had that working relationship with Anthem? Had that deal where they could co-promote events together. I mean, Ring of Honor and the NWA, up until this whole COVID-19, were working together to try to promote these events. I felt like there was some star power behind the NWA invading these Ring of Honor events. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it, that I think our world's heavyweight champion is a star. I think the wrestling world is very underutilizing the talents of Nick Aldis, who should be in the WWE. He should be in New Japan Pro Wrestling. He should be on the moniker of the top wrestlers in the country, in the world, but he's not. He isn't. And it's not because he's untalented, it's just because, for whatever reason, he hasn't got that opportunity yet. So I can see some of you guys have comments set up already here, so let's go ahead and get to them. First and foremost, Stan the Man says, new intro. Yes, my friend Josh Shibata, who I said earlier, the voice of Future Stars of Wrestling and the voice of Ground Zero Wrestling in San Diego. Sorry, I had a brain fart. It was recorded that for me. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just a little trying to get used to the new adjustments in here. Kakushi said, Stan says the budget going up. No, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of disappointed. I was hoping to have a better lookout for you guys. Turns out webcams are essentially unavailable, and everyone has bought them. So it will still be a while before we get set up the way I would like to be in here in the studios, but you have to make do with what you can. So, and then Kukushi says, any chance we can introduce the question mark to Carol Baskins? I haven't seen the Tiger King show. I don't really know much about it. And yes, Kokushi, that is the dog logo. Because if you could see here to my left, it might be broadcasting to your right, I'm not sure. But this is the AllianceWrestling.com website. It's your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. And one of the promotions we still cover, even though they're no longer associated with the National Wrestling Alliance, is Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators. They're actually one of my favorite promotions. They promote out of New Jersey. Usually have events in Glassboro. If you guys are, when this pandemic comes to, closure and life starts happening again, I very much would encourage you to check out some of their live events. And then also I'd recommend visiting their YouTube channel. I'm sure you can find that at dogprowrestling.com. Terry McDermott says Paul Bosch worked with everyone. He absolutely did. And the NWA, to an extent, will work with everyone. The only person the NWA won't work with is Impact. And, of course, I mean, like I said, there was litigation, there were lawsuits. I mean, this could have been the documentary on Netflix everyone was watching. Okay, maybe not, but still, it would have been an interesting, at least for me, to see what happened and what was all going on. Chris Drummond, who is on our Instagram Live, says, the problem is Aldis is seen only as a star in the NWA. Do you guys agree? Leave a comment below if you agree with that. I don't. I mean, I think that especially right now in terms of promo ability, who's better than Nick Aldis? Really? WWE? I mean, look, I'm kind of a big fan of Samoa Joe. I'm a big fan of Kevin Owens. And I think they cut great promos. I think Nick Aldis could cut a promo right up there with them. I don't think that there's any kind of a gap in between the ability to cut a promo between those stars and this one. So what would an NWA Impact relationship look like? Chris says the only star. Okay, you say he's the only star, but then I'm going to go ahead and point out Eli Drake. I'm going to point out James Storm. I'm going to point out Aaron Stevens, the shooter. I'm going to point out, to a lesser extent, Ricky Starks, who I think is really coming into his own. I think Zicky Dice is certainly reaching for that brass ring. I can't agree with you saying that he's their only star. He might not be your favorite, but he certainly has some name recognition. Stan says that Undertaker promo last night was perfect. You know, I don't watch Raw, I'll be honest. The only time I see Raw is I see clips of it on Facebook and on Twitter. And I heard it was good. I didn't see it. I kind of find it hard to be excited about WrestleMania with all the changes that are happening. The fact that they're still announcing the big dog when the big dog ain't going to be there. I think that's kind of lowbrow. And I know that it's the WWE and we all can expect that from them. But, I mean, that's the ultimate, bait and switch. So, more of your comments. Devin Mercer said he has limited exposure. Nick Aldis, yeah, he does. And, he was the captain at the helm of Impact for a little bit. He did work some dates in Pro Wrestling Noah. He does have limited exposure. How do they fix that? I mean, Power goes on every week and people watch it. Just reading more comments, guys. I'm sorry. And still, NWA says Chris Drummond is saying he's the only star, not as star only in the NWA. I think. I'm not sure. Chris, clarify what you meant. He says, I mean, who is this number 2 star in the NWA? Well, I think I just gave a good list of a couple of names. Eli Drake for one. Right now, Stan says, right now I don't see that partnership happening. Better off partnering with a Japanese promotion. Yeah, Stan, this is no. I'm not advocating for a relationship with Impact and the NWA. I just find it kind of interesting because tonight we are going to get the NWA appearing in the Impact Zone. And again, when that happened, it seemed like that there might be something more to just that one match that never really materialized. And now this is just an effort of what if. This is just a big giant what if episode. What if the NWA Lightning 1 ended up working with Anthem? More of your comments. I love Aldis, and I love James Storm, but it seems like Aldis is the only person pushed. Chris, yeah, that's true. But seemed like that was the same thing for Ric Flair for many, many years, too. I mean, opponents would get built up by working with him. Kind of like how Ricky Starks got a push right after his match with the world's champion, Nick Aldis. Chris says, I'd love to see Thunder Rosa in Ring of Honor. I'm sure Ring of Honor would love to see Thunder Rosa as well. And then Terry says, I see the NWA as a less soap opera and less carnival. Younger fans seem to think that is wrestling, thanks to Vince. And you're not wrong with that, Terry, and that's why it's kind of an alternative. I mean, you could go and look, and I could pull up the numbers right now because I got this fancy computer right here. But, if you were to go to the NWA website and look at the views, they're down, guys. They've been down. They've been down since the second pay-per-view. And, the last episode of NWA Power is at 165,000 views. Okay? Episode 15 that ended right before the pay-per-view was called Generation Clash, and that had 279,000 views. So, it kind of deterred and dropped over and over the course of the last few weeks, months. And of course, there hasn't been a new episode of NWA Power, but even the live events, these pay-per-views, the 70th anniversary pay-per-view that went out a week ago, less than 80,000 people watched that. The pop-up event with David Arquette and Jocephus as one of the highlights, again, less than 60,000 people watched it. There has been a decrease in viewership. Now, again, these are reruns, right? If you order the pay-per-views, you've seen these matches, but I don't think 60,000 people ordered the pay-per-view the first time around. So, DKM says Flair had Rhodes. Absolutely. Flair WWE, right? Sting was the one to kind of cash in on Flair. Dusty was relevant, but Dusty was also the booker, right? Who else? Honestly. Chris says, but can we see the tag champs battle some top-level teams? I know people hate Enzo and Cass, but a match would grab headlines. See, now that's dangerous, right? Because Enzo and Cass are kind of like a cancer. Bringing a cancer into the NWA might be the death knell. So many problems they've already had with controversial statements, controversial people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think that's a good move. Chris says, is it the roster? Is it the roster that's not stepping up to meet the challenge of Nick Aldis? I mean, look. Like, 330 nights a year? And would wrestle in every different town and face different competitors, but all under the NWA banner. There hasn't been an NWA that strong since. The closest thing that comes to mind was right before the Tharp era, when the NWA had promotions that were actually running TV in Tennessee, in West Virginia, in New Jersey, in Maine, and Los Angeles. And those shows, did garner some interest, but again, they were never to the extent of what Flair had, working 360 days a year. So, we're getting limited matches with limited talent and limited arenas, and even more so today because they don't even really officially recognize, they don't even officially recognize the defenses that happen outside of NWA Power. I mean, recognized, sure, on paper, but they don't talk about it on TV. Like, we didn't hear about, some of the matches that Nick Aldis had, like Marcus Burke that up in Canada, or against Mr. Kennedy out in Wisconsin. I mean, these matches weren't really typed up or talked about on Power. So, you could say, well, Flair had Flair had Dusty, and yeah, he did, but Flair was also wrestling all across the country in NWA territories and NWA matches, and unfortunately, Aldis doesn't have that same luxury. Pierce did, but even to that, the extent was less. DKM says, heated rivalry is needed. Flair always seemed on the verge of losing his title. DKM, I could wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think that's what they're trying to do right now with the villain, Marty Scurll, and I think that's what they were going for. That there's even a chance when this is all said and done that Marty might be the next NWA World Champion, or this just might be another roadblock, waiting for Eli Drake to become free, and that's really the money match I think the NWA has. I think that's right now. Unless there's a way to get All Elite Wrestling to work with the NWA and make Cody versus Nick 3, I think Eli Drake is the best match you could have. I think Muta is a lesser extent a really good money match that I think a lot of people would be interested in because of the history that Muta has with the NWA. But again, there's not an easy way to build that with a talent who doesn't actually reside in the country, and it's hard to get all those videos and stuff like that. Plus, he's expensive. Is it the roster that clicking to the fans? Chris, not clicking to the fans. Chris, I don't know, man. I mean, the roster's kind of had some changes over the last few months. I mean, we started off with a very kind of, about 12 guys total on the roster and a couple of women. The tag team division has grown a little bit. The women's roster's grown a little bit. We've seen some faces change. Cabana's gone. Not Carl Anderson, but Ken Anderson is gone. Mr. Kennedy, or whatever he goes by, he's gone. Scott Steiner was here for just a minute. The roster has changed somewhat. We got the addition of the question mark to go with some of the other guys like Aaron Stevens. I mean, Aaron Stevens has been here for a while, but he's really kind of a focal point now. So, we got C.W. Anderson joining the show on a more consistent basis. But again, a lot of the roster has been kind of ho-hum, right? There's guys who are made for TV and guys who are big name attractions, and then some guys who aren't. So, roster not clicking with the fans. I don't know. I think the roster is probably better today than it was 6 months ago, but the viewership doesn't seem to agree with that. Could imagine these new guys facing someone like Ox Baker. Terry, I don't think so. I mean, look, the closest thing they have to Ox Baker is Trevor Murdoch, right? A big, tough dude who's no nonsense in the ring. I mean, he doesn't really play around. I mean, he's had a few moments where he's kind of, goofing off, but for the most part, he's been all business in some of those matches. His match with Nick Aldis was pretty friggin' stiff. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd be worried for Trevor if prime Ox Baker walks into the ring, but who's to say? I think this show needs to be a little more consistent in presentation. Absolutely, the show should be more consistent in presentation, and we should see more of that. But unfortunately, with this whole COVID-19, we're not seeing anything. I mean, this week we are getting, we're getting Tim Storm versus Jocephus in an empty arena match. And you know what? I do want to take my hat off to the NWA because they're attempting to do something. They're attempting to create content. I think that, in tonight's empty arena match, that this would have been a perfect opportunity to tie in that Tiger King in pro wrestling with Tim Storm interview that they did just a few days prior. Not only got 11,000 people to watch that, but that would have just stretched out today's program. And plus, with the headlines, they could have worked that to make it meaningful. But, of course, that's not what happened, so we'll see. Chris Drummond says, would you be okay with the Ring of Honor guy being NWA champion? I wouldn't have a problem with that. I didn't have a problem with Cody winning it. I mean, what do you guys think? Would you have a problem with the Ring of Honor wrestler holding the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, the 10 pounds of gold? Sure, why not? Adam Pearce wrestled Nigel McGuinness in a title match. I would not have been upset at all if Nigel McGuinness had won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Brent Albright, by all accounts, was a Ring of Honor guy, and he held the NWA World Championship. Pierce was under contract to Ring of Honor as NWA World Champion. Didn't have a problem with him holding the title, and would I mind Jay Lethal being NWA World Champion? Not at all. Jay Lethal's a hell of a competitor. Marty Scurll, hell of a competitor. But absolutely. DCAM says he wouldn't like it. And that's fair. You guys, I have an interview tonight. I'm going to interview one half of the tag team known as the Wild Card, former tag team champions. I'll be speaking to Royce Isaacs later this evening. We'll be doing an interview, and hopefully I'll have that up for you like today or tomorrow. Well, probably not today, but most likely tomorrow. And I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to do that for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy it. That'll be coming soon. But the topic at hand that we're kind of straying away from is, what would a relationship look like with the NWA and Impact Wrestling? Now, when you look at the Impact roster, I mean, there are a lot of guys there who, we're all pretty familiar with. One guy in particular, Willie Mack, was a former NWA national champion. I'd love to see him back in the NWA. The women's division, it's a little bit hokey in Impact. I mean, I really don't want to see her wrestling Nick Aldis in a title unification match. But there are some things about Impact that have been interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing somebody like Taya Valkyrie. Am I saying that right? Taya? The Mrs. Mundo, Mrs. Impact, whatever. In terms of tag teams, I mean, what is it? Ohio versus everyone? OVE? OVE versus Drake and Storm? I don't know if that's all that compelling. Yeah, I don't even know if the rosters mesh very well. What do you guys think? Chris says, I don't want it to be treated like a secondary belt in Ring of Honor. I only want a relationship if we can get access to old footage. Chris, what are you talking about, the old footage? Some of that footage isn't even owned by Ring of Honor. It's owned by Mark Cuban and HDNet or Access, whatever you want to call it. Jordan Grace and Tessa in the NWA. I mean, Jordan Grace versus Thunder Rosa versus Allison K. Hey, we just lost lights over there. Hang on just a second. Let me see what I can do. Hang on just a second, fellas. There we go. That's a lot better. Okay. NWA matches and Impact library. Oh, okay. There you go, Chris. Now that's a bright spot. Sure. Hey, you guys remember how close Impact came to going under just a few years ago? I mean, we're talking. There were rumors that somebody had bought the NWA. Excuse me. There were rumors that somebody had bought Impact Wrestling. That might have even been Billy Corgan, but the library was sold to the WWE. Do you guys remember that? I'm not alone in that, right? That's not crazy talk, is it? Because there was a lot of talk that the WWE would get the library and somebody else was going to buy TNA, and they had all these great plans that never came to fruition. And of course, then somehow, some way, the cockroach known as Impact Wrestling survived, just like the NWA. It's weird how we talk about Impact Wrestling being on its deathbed and going out of business. That company now exists longer than WCW. Now, I know that's not Jim Crockett Promotions. I'm just talking about Time Warner and Ted Turner owning the WCW. That timetable has been blown away by what Impact Wrestling TNA has been able to do. So, I mean, it's funny how for years we've talked about TNA going out of business, but they're still here, much like the NWA. They just doesn't seem to want to disappear. Kakushi says, I don't like Jordan. DCam says, I lost all respect for Tessa. DCam, enlighten us. Why did you lose respect for Tessa? Is it because she's the women's world, or she's the world heavyweight champion, or it has to do with her relationship with Daga, or is it because the things that reportedly she had said on the internet? I mean, right there, that alone would keep Allison Kay from working with Tessa. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, DCam. The original story was, I was right, was that Billy Corgan was going to buy TNA and the WWE was going to buy the library. What would have been really interesting is if they did that, but they only sold him the rights to the TNA after the NWA relationship. Because that NWA video library, I mean, I don't know what Billy Corgan's plan was all along. But that NWA library is kind of rich. I mean, they've got AJ Styles. They've got, hey, J-Rod, thanks for tuning into the show. AJ Styles as the world champion, Ron Killings, Ken Shamrock. Lots of good stuff in those days. A lot of appearances by Dusty Rhodes. Good stuff. But needless to say that the relationship with Impact, I mean, it's not going to happen. I think we're more likely to see this continuing relationship of Ring of Honor and the NWA. I think we're also more likely to see AEW somehow working with the NWA at some point. Kikuchi says they should have a promotion run by Bruce Tharpe, Dixie Carter, Dale Gagne, and booked by Vince Russo. That'd be like Herb Abrams' UWF, wouldn't it? I am actually looking forward to the Vice stories, the dark side of wrestling. I want to see that Herb Abrams special, the UWF, not to be associated with Bill Watts' UWF, but yeah, I was never a big fan of Vince Russo's booking. I've gone on at length about my thoughts on Bruce Tharpe on this show and on other shows. Dixie Carter, I have nothing to say about her. And Dale Gagne is a fraud. Dale Gagne. Put an R on it. He says, Chris Drummond says, I see more CMLL guys in the NWA in 2020. Hey, that's not a bad thing either. I mean, CMLL has always respected those NWA titles and treated them as grand prizes for their promotion. Even after the whole debacle of Blue Demon's NWA Mexico and the NWA sending a cease and desist letter to CMLL, I mean, that's all laughable, guys. Nothing ever happened. They changed the name and still called them the NWA, just NWA historic titles. Okay. What changed? Nothing. One of the problems that the NWA has is, of course, a lot of these guys are signed, a lot of the better talents are signed to contracts elsewhere. It's just a fact. I mean, even Ring of Honor recently signed Ray Horus, and this is during the quarantine. This is during, there's no new shows happening, but guys with good talent are getting picked up, and there's so many good to medium-sized promotions right now. Outside of the WWE, you still have, of course you have All Elite Wrestling, but you also have TNA, Impact. You also have Ring of Honor. You have MLW. You have NWA. Then you have the international promotions like CMLL, New Japan, AAA, All Japan, Pro Wrestling Noah. And that's not even getting into some of the promotions in the UK. And then there's some of these, I can't remember the name of the promotion, but there's one happening in the Middle East. And Eric Bischoff is promoting it. Mark Henry was a part of it. I think the Great Khali has something to do with it. In Australia, they have the World Series of Wrestling with these international tours of great talents. I mean, there's so much wrestling going on, prior to COVID-19, so much wrestling going on, that's hard to get talent to be secured with one promotion. I mean, even some of the top names in AEW have clauses in their contract that allow them to work New Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, what does that say? You're not even exclusive. AEW is still maybe number 3 or 4 on the world's greatest, biggest wrestling promotions. They're not bigger than New Japan Pro Wrestling, and their top stars still have the ability to work New Japan. Think about that. More of your comments. Did you know Trevor Murdoch is so tough? I know what that is. Kakushi, I know what you're saying. I'm not going to read that out loud because I'm just not going to do that. Because I have fully stocked paper towels and toilet paper. And if you guys don't, I'm sorry. Hope you find something. But going back to the topic, so Ring of Honor and the NWA seem like that relationship is going to be here for a while. Of course, everything's been put on hold while we're waiting for this whole pandemic to end, and hopefully it's not affecting you guys. Hopefully you're still able to have somewhat of a normal life. We're here locked down at the JCal compound. I mean, we're here in the studios that are reinforced. There's no windows. I can't see outside. I miss my friends. Am I rambling? Sorry guys, I've been locked up too long. But again, I really think that if Anthem and Lightning One were able to work some sort of deal where Impact and the NWA did work together, like I said, Big Chris pointed out the video library. I'm more thinking like, look at those matches. There's no telling what kind of great matches we might have had or might have seen, and unfortunately we didn't get those because, of course, that didn't work out. So, but tonight we are gonna have that empty arena from the Impact Zone, and I don't know how they're repackaging this. I don't know if it's gonna be a full 40 minutes. If they're just going to show the match, which I believe was about 15 to 20 minutes, if they're going to run some of the backstory for that. But there was a backstory with Tim Storm and Jocephus. Of course, we all look at Jocephus as the joke that he is now in the NWA, but prior to that, I mean, he was kind of a force to be reckoned with in the National Wrestling Alliance. He actually he was one of the challenges to Jax Dane when he was working for NWA Saw, and it would have been interesting to see, that Jocephus in the NWA, not the guy who has this spiritual advisor and is kind of a running gag, losing 3% of his vision because of Tim Storm and all this silly stuff. It would have been nice to see, Jocephus Brody, the guy who was, bloodthirsty and was looking for violence, and maybe that would have been different. More of your comments. Kakushi. No, I'm not reading that. Chris says, I believe the NWA and New Japan can be stronger. It's up to Billy. Chris, I think if there was an opportunity that Lightning One, meaning Dave Lagana and Billy Corgan, would jump at that, why wouldn't they? The NWA, let's be realistic. For the wrestlers in the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA is a commitment 3 days a month. It's 3 days a month. Honestly. The pay-per-view and 2 TV tapings, and you're done. And a promotion like New Japan Pro Wrestling, who is trying to get their foothold in the United States, that would have been ideal. That would have been perfect. You know, Carl Fredericks. I honestly don't know the whole New Japan USA roster, but Rocky Romero. I mean, think about it. Rocky Romero and Ricky Starks, that'd be a hell of a fun match. Carl Fredericks, who the last time I saw him was just so crisp in that ring. I mean, he is not a wily vet, but him and Nick Aldis would make for some interesting TV, I think. And you know, all the talent that would come from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Maybe another Kojima versus maybe Kojima coming to the United States to take on Aldis, or maybe even Tenzan. Or maybe Tenzan and Kojima taking on the wild cards. I mean, there's so many different options that could have happened with the New Japan NWA relationship. And hey, it still might happen, you know? We're on hold, guys. We're on hold until the NWA, until COVID-19 clears out of not just this country, but the entire world. And after that, maybe things will happen. You know, people are going to be more desperate. People are looking for eyeballs. People are looking to create content. The NWA is a company that wants to be important. They want to do things that grab your attention. Working with New Japan Pro Wrestling certainly would make sense. Kukushi says the NWA should join forces with MLW. That wouldn't be a bad idea either. I mean, we'd get the Von Erichs and the Crockett Cup, right? And then DCAM said, why would MLW want to? 3 days for two months. I think DCAM was saying about my commitment to the NWA. Yeah, 3 days for 2 months. Honestly. And if it was a little bit more, I mean, how much more could it be? And think about that. If you are Royce Isaacs, the gentleman I will be speaking to later tonight, and you have an opportunity to literally work 3 days and have your face out there for 2 months on relatively popular YouTube program, that makes a lot of sense. And then getting other dates with, you know, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, or AML, or, you know, Tried and True Pro Wrestling, or Championship Wrestling from Arizona, or, you know, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, or Bar Wrestling, or wherever. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? You're building your name on these YouTube shows, these pay-per-views, and then you're working, and there's not a lot of limitations. You're giving up one Sunday, a Monday, and Tuesday a month. What are you really losing? Not a whole lot. Aldis, Drake, Storm, etc. added to the current roster would help fill holes led by a talent going to AEW. And I think Kokushi was talking about MLW. Yeah, I do believe that Aldis, Drake, and Storm have some celebrity, some star power. Of course, I don't think it's like Hulk Hogan in the 80s or Sting in the 90s, but I think it does has value, right? And I think in a show that is losing some of their star power to MLW, I mean, look, I don't want to see the Sheik anywhere near the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but how about the Samoan Werewolf? I think he's still MLW champion. Jacob Fatu taking on Nick Aldis. That would be an interesting match. Even if it wasn't title for title, just putting Aldis in that kind of a match with someone who is brutal and physical as Jacob Fatu, I think would add something to, you know, the history, the legacy, the tradition of the National Wrestling Alliance. Chris Drummond says, I found the perfect feud for Aldis, Jeff Cobb. The only problem is Jeff Cobb, I believe, is signed with AEW, right? I don't think he's like a free agent. I think he's got commitments to AEW. Again, this would be perfect if the NWA could work out a deal with AEW. But I think if you're going to work out with AEW, the match everyone wants is Cody versus Nick. And I think that could still happen, and I think it still will happen, just not anytime soon. The NWA won't work with the fake Sheik. I don't know, man. Billy Corgan used to promote wrestling in Chicago, and guess who one of his guys was? Oh, DKM says Cobb is a free agent. Huh. Well then, yeah, absolutely. Look, anytime you could get a guy who has value, you definitely want to bring him on board. Sure. I would take Jeff Cobb versus Nick Aldis. I mean, I don't think Jeff Cobb can cut a great promo, but his skills in the ring are, pretty legit. One of the matches that I'm looking forward to, and I hope the NWA runs with it, is you've got Jack Stane, who's back in the NWA. Now, we don't know what the status is of Jack Stane's deal with the NWA, because we don't know if that was a one-off match with Tim Storm, and of course the NWA isn't saying anything. They haven't even released the results of that match yet, but I would imagine that Jack Stane was there for more than just one match with Tim Storm, and I think Jack Stane could be a very interesting challenge for that World's Heavyweight Championship, especially if they let him be Jack Stane. Now J-Rod fired back. He says MLW is hot. And that would be hot fire if they had shows or exchanged talent back together. And J-Rod, I think the guys over here on YouTube agree with you. I think MLW has a lot of value to work with. I think that's true. But what's in it for them? And that's the thing. How do you sell it to MLW? How do you sell it to Corey? That's his name, right? Corey. And a fourth. Okay. Terry McDonald says, I would like to see Aldis against Pete Dunne, but that will not happen soon. No, it won't. It won't. It'd be cool, but it won't. I think if, look, to be quite honest, if Jay Cal can make the whole world bend to his will, the first match we would see would be Scrap Iron Adam Pearce challenging Nick Aldis for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, and it would happen at an NXT TakeOver, possibly before WrestleMania, what, if this is 35, I guess 36? I know that would put Pearce another year older. I know that would put Aldis another year older. But I still think Pearce can wrestle. I still think he could have a great match. The promos would be fire. You guys all know that. Don't even bother disagreeing with me because you're wrong. Then, when Aldis is successful in retaining his World's Heavyweight Championship, the next matchup should be the first ever SummerSlam. Well, not the first ever, but the next SummerSlam in the UK. Wembley Stadium, paying homage to Davey Boy Smith Jr., that you would put Nick Aldis, NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, against Triple H, a guy who loves the legacy of the NWA and the 10 pounds of gold. And I think that would be a great match. And I don't care if Triple H would win the title. I don't care if Nick Aldis would look bad in that match. I think that kind of a match would definitely put a spotlight on the NWA, and they can figure out what happens next after the fact. We could have Triple H appearing on NWA Power for a couple of weeks until Eli Drake beats him, or Nick Aldis gets the title back, whatever they want to do. To me, if they could scope that, if they could make that happen, the NWA would be on fire. Not to be confused with the old wrestling promotion NWA on Fire. That's just something separate. More of your comments. Based on what Lagana said on Twitter to the Sheik. That's fair. Look, nobody... I don't like the Sheik. I don't think... I know Lagana. I've talked to Lagana. I've had meals with Lagana. I don't think Lagana likes the Sheik. But you never can say never in pro wrestling. Kokushi says Aldis versus Davey Boy Smith Jr., Aldis versus Hammerstone, Aldis versus Richard Holiday, Aldis versus Brian Pillman Jr., Aldis versus LA Park. That's all pretty good. DKM says MLW is okay. DKM also says MLW doesn't want all their guys to be fed to another promotion's champion. Hey, that's fair too, right? They got to get some victories too, but you know what? You also got a national champion and a TV champion, so that you can feed both ways. You know what I mean? It doesn't just have to be one way. They could figure it out. They can figure it out. MLW. Chris Drummond says, how far would you push Colby Corino if you ran the NWA? Right now, I wouldn't. I'm looking you straight in the eyes. Colby Corino is not a draw. I'm not a fan of Colby Corino. I like underdog stories, and I hope that he gets his life back on track. But most wrestling fans who are watching NWA Power right now were not watching Steve Corino carry that NWA 10 pounds of gold to Joe Price's NWA Florida, or to Dave Republic's ECCW, or, there's other guys whose names I don't want to mention. Mike Porter's Memphis Championship Wrestling or main event, whatever it was. It just, there's no connection. Now, if this would have been, if Steve Corino was still around, if it was Steve Corino and Colby Corino at the TV, at the Circle Squared, that would be different, but it's not. The connection isn't there. That NWA is so far removed from now that these guys don't know. You go into these chat rooms with these NWA fans and you talk about Adam Pearce, and they don't know who he is. And that was just a few years ago. So, Steve Corino, great talent. Steve Corino would love to see associated with the NWA. Steve Corino wish was a part of the NWA today. Steve Corino is just not there. He's just not a factor. Which, how much value does Colby have? Any relationship with MLW would be like Ring of Honor. And again, I don't know if that's a bad thing, right? I don't know if that's a bad thing. Imagine the Crockett Cup if you were able to work in some MLW tag teams. I'm not asking, again, I don't want anything to do with the Sheik. I want nothing to do with the Sheik. But the Von Erich brothers, put them in the Crockett Cup. What if the Von Erich brothers, right, eliminated James Storm and Eli Drake, the NWA Tag Team Champions? Now you're set up for the next pay-per-view, right? Because now the Von Erichs have a legitimate challenge to win those titles. Well, what if the Von Erich brothers don't win the Crockett Cup? What if it's another tag team from Ring of Honor? What if it's a tag team from New Japan? What if it's a tag team from CMLL? Don't know. I'm just saying there's so much that could have happened or can happen that still may happen. I wouldn't have a problem with any of those things happening. DCAM says the relationship with Ring of Honor and the NWA is bad. I don't know if I agree with that. Look, let's be honest. Okay? A lot was supposed to happen at the Crockett Cup. Crockett Cup is supposed to happen this month, and it's not going to. Now, the NWA, I think we could all agree that the NWA probably needed more footage to get to this point anyways, because if they, they're reworking these shows to get ready for the Crockett Cup. We don't even know. Sounds like the Crockett Cup won't even happen until later this year, maybe July. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad relationship. I think we'd have to wait and see. Of course, all programming has been stopped, so there isn't more Ring of Honor programming. The NWA can't piggyback off of that and vice versa. So I don't know what would have happened with that relationship. Of course, these matches were taped back in January, guys. That's January. January feels like a lifetime ago. Ring of Honor fans don't give an F about the NWA story, according to DKM. And that might be true, DKM. That might be true. But, they were kind of starting to build for things, and I think we didn't get enough interaction in Ring of Honor yet. And again, we don't know what was going to happen. I do know this. I know that Mr. Dave Logano was supposed to be in Las Vegas shooting some new stuff, new material for the Crockett Cup or NWA Power. I'm not exactly sure, but had to get turned around on his flight because the COVID-19 canceled all the shows. I think there could have been more to it. I think we're kind of a victim of circumstances. I think we're a victim of the COVID-19. I think we might have been a victim of poor planning for the NWA, but ultimately we never got the story that they wanted to tell. We still might get it, but we don't have it now. So I don't know what to say. You could say that the fans don't give an F. I would say that they don't have a reason to give an F, and we didn't get to that point yet. So man, I'm thirsty. Well, we went a little bit longer than normal, guys, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this show is so much more fun when you guys are interacting. I hope you guys are having fun too. Your voice is being heard. We talk about this, and I get people sending me messages or private, leaving comments on the videos about what we're talking about. I really appreciate it. This is fun for me, guys, and of course, we're all stuck. Well, maybe some of you are at work, and I'm sorry if you are. I'm stuck at home right now, so this is a really fun outlet for me, and I want to start doing some more videos, so we might see some more soon. Of course, stay tuned to all of your favorite AllianceWrestling.com, Alliance-Wrestling.com social media sites to stay connected, and that's at the Alliance Blog on TikTok, Tumblr, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Did I say Twitter? And then also I want to recommend to my friends who are in thirst of more wrestling content, please visit Dog Pro Wrestling on YouTube. You can just type that in, DAWG Pro Wrestling, and you'll find some matches out of Glassboro, New Jersey, and surrounding areas, and you can help sponsor and support my friends over at Dog Pro Wrestling. I know that they've been hurt by this COVID-19. They've had a couple shows get canceled, and that's a bummer, but life keeps going. Also, I want to send a special thank you to Rick Del Santo. He purchased one of the Alliance Wrestling t-shirts, that logo right there on a t-shirt. We're working with Kerouac, our friend of the show, on coming up with a new design, so we'll have some new shirts soon. But if you guys enjoy the program, you enjoy these podcasts, and you have the means to do so, buy a shirt, man. I'd appreciate it. But that's going to wrap it up for this week. So I'm going to say my goodbyes, and thank you guys for checking us out. It's always a blast, and I'll see you at the matches. Now let's see if I can turn this off. Is it working? Nope, not working. Turn off. There it is. All right, guys, go watch NWA Empty Arena match.